Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions regarding this watch. Today we're discussing what may be my favorite ever Ressence timepiece from the Swiss-Belgian hybrid Ressence. This is the Type 3 Eucalyptus. Launched in 2023, it takes everything we love about the later versions of the Type 3 and combines it with a beautiful eucalyptus green dial. So when I say later versions of the Type 3, of course, I mean this one has the full-blown dial side thermometer along with the oil-filled module and the regulator style display and a day-date functionality. There's a lot to love here. It's 44 millimeters in diameter in grade 5 titanium, though in truth, if you look at it, the case is comprised more of sapphire than it is of the titanium. The watch is 44 millimeters in diameter. It's not super thick, but it's also not super thin. It's 16 millimeters thick, though with a sloped flank cuff should slide over it in most cases. I measure it 52 from lug to lug, and then the spacing on the lug, it is a conventional lug, it's 22. If you look very carefully here, you could see that the way this works is, let me try to demonstrate this right here. We have these continuous bars. I just want to demonstrate that this is very much unlike conventional watch in that the strap is sort of fitted around the bar, almost like an old wire lug Panerai from the 1930s. It is a fascinating kind of junction. And then there's the strap itself, which is a Ressence piece. They call this rough leather, so it's a suede calfskin. It is buttery soft. It's a more conventional grain on the bottom. You can see the Ressence hand logo because Benoit Mintians, an industrial designer by trade, wanted the company to be approachable and friendly. And so you will see that design recurring on the watches. We have this interesting counterweighted titanium pin buckle. There's a little hand with a little recess for the pin inside the buckle. And we have these elongated perforations in order to admit this elongated pin. So there's a lot of thoughtful, unusual design going on here. The case itself is so spare, it's almost not there. The mid case and the lugs are essentially one big loop that run all the way around. It is polished. Grade 5 tie is really scratch resistant, more than grade 2, but also more than traditional watchmaking steels. And that's before we get to the sapphires, which are incredibly hard, a 9 on the Mohs scale, second only to diamonds. So what we've got on top is the Ressence Orbital convex system. It is a module. This is the ROCS 3.5. It's full of 37.5 milliliters of oil. And aside from an unusual aesthetic, the reason they're doing that is because it has the same index of refraction as the sapphire crystal. So from any angle, you have a very clear and easy view of the time and the calendar displays. There are 7 bellows inside that can accommodate temperature change, expanding and contracting as the oil heats up and cools down. Also important to note is that this is essentially sealed. I once asked Benoit what needs to be done to service this watch because it seems a little bit intimidating, and he said that the module is basically sealed and requires nothing, so it's really just a service on the ETA 28242 that drives it through a mechanical clutch based on magnets. So you've got this magnet clutch, and there is shielding to protect the hairspring, but there's no physical fitting that goes through a seal and a direct conduit from the movement to the capsule. So it sits completely hermetically sealed, linked to the base movement by a magnet. So because this is bathed in oil, it's self-lubricating and it doesn't need any service. It's a really cool system on a lot of levels. And it's a very unique aesthetic because while Zinn did something similar like this with Hydro on their own watches and also on the Bell & Rosses they made in the past, those were always very flat profiles, whereas this has an incredible camber that takes advantage of that constant index of refraction. There is lume, although I have to warn you, this one isn't as volcanically bright, as an incandescent as a normal Ressence would be. It looks brighter, I'm going to say, underneath the camera. It's kind of faint to see with the eye, but it is definitely all there. It also makes it easy to see how we have this date outboard. It's at the very outermost reaches of the dial, and then we have this little index right here that features 7 arcs representing the 7 days of the week. That moves in a clockwise direction, and then those little red arcs represent Saturday and Sunday. Now, it also features a thermometer. We talked about the bellows that accommodate the expansion and contraction of the oil, and so it's important to remember that there is theoretically an operating temperature limit here, and that temperature limit is going to be 5 degrees Celsius up to 45 degrees Celsius. And 45 degrees Celsius is incredibly hot. Multiply by 1.8 and add 32 if you want that in Fahrenheit. And so there's another thing you should know, which is that on the wrist, even if you were in, let's say, like 2, 3, 4 degrees Celsius below the limit, the wrist would be imparting enough heat to handle that small discrepancy. So it really has to be well below 5 degrees Celsius for this to succumb to the cold in any meaningful way. Also important to note, the watch has a lot of cool features, such as crownless construction and case-back winding and setting. So you do all of the setting using the case-back. Now, there are quick-set operations that involve reversals to adjust the calendar functions. It is a regulator in a sense, in that we have the hours, the minutes, and then in a manner of speaking, a seconds display. They call this the runner, and as often is the case with Ressence watches, it indicates the operation of the watch, but it does not make 1 circuit per minute. This makes 1 circuit every 3 minutes or 180 seconds. So it's not strictly a seconds display, but it will let you know the watch is running. So we have this sort of modified seconds display, the minute display, and the hours. That's a regulator. We've got the thermometer. We have the days of the week, and then we have outboard, this little index pointing to the date down at the bottom. So let me demonstrate, for example, how you can read the time quite precisely. So you see right here, I'm looking at 8, and I'm wondering what. Okay, I can also see that it's the first day of the weekend because this moves clockwise. So it's 8 o'clock on Saturday the 2nd. But is it AM or PM? Well, we can tell because you could see that this little hand is in the first half of the arc. So we know here we are looking at 8 AM on Saturday the 2nd. That's how that works. Turn it all over and you can see that we have a system that is automatic winding, although you can manually wind it. So you see how it has this little arrow for winding and then instructions for setting the day, and note it has a silicone-based oil, so don't shatter it. And Ressence is designed in Belgium, but made in Switzerland. All of this with the 10-meter water resistance. They recommend only splash or rain exposure. Even though it's automatic, you will find that as you turn it, there's a distinct friction zone. So you just reverse and sort of ratchet through that friction zone to manually wind the movement if you want to get it started quickly. Inside, it's a 2824, which means a 4 hertz beat rate, 36-hour power reserve in this application, and then the composite of the ROCS module, which is like, it's like they really did make their own movement and stick it on top of a base movement. It's got 47 joules, of which only 25 are in the base caliber. So people say, oh, well, they use an ETA movement. I say, yeah, but the module they built is more complex than the base caliber. That's why I have no problem calling this manufacturer watchmaking, even though it has a customer caliber base. It's one of my favorite brands, and this is probably my all-time favorite model, the one I would buy for myself if I had limitless funds and a chance to do so. But you can make my dream yours. So reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.